Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs Talks Music and another edition of Anniversary Albums. Today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of January 2025. Can you believe it's a new year already? Happy New Year to you all. And we're going to be looking at 10 albums, as we always do, that are having a significant anniversary. For those of you who are new to this series, when I say a significant anniversary, I'm talking about one that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 60th, 35th, 50th, that sort of thing. You'll get the hang of it as we go along. As always, I've picked 10 albums. Fully half of them are from 1980. So January 1980, the decade of the 80s, which is probably my favorite music decade, because it was the decade that I grew up in, first listening to music. Getting off to a terrific start. And including these first couple of albums, which are debut albums. The first one released on the 4th of January 1980, having its 45th anniversary in the month of January, and that is the self-titled album by the Romantics. Look at those suits and skinny ties. It was just like such a look for the beginning of the 80s. And those haircuts too, just great. But the music on here, it's just wonderful, wonderful power pop. It's great, it's crunchy. This album didn't do terrifically well in the US, which is where they're from. Here in Australia, in 1980, they had a massive hit here with the song What I Like About You, which did become a hit for them several years later over in America and Europe and what have you. But it was a hit here in Australia first and foremost. It wasn't really until their third album, I think it was, with the single Talking in Your Sleep, that they really sort of had mainstream success in their home country. But this album's so much more than just What I Like About You. You've also got When I Look in Your Eyes, Tell It to Carrie, First in Line, Keep in Touch, Girl Next Door. On side 2, you've got She's Got Everything, Till I See You Again, Hung on You, Little White Lies, Give Me One More Chance. It's just a terrific album top to bottom. Really great, really, there's not a lot of overdubbing and flashy production and all that sort of thing on this album. It's just 4 guys, 2 guitars, bass, drums, and a great time had by all. Great, great songs. Also releasing their self-titled debut in the month of January on the 11th of January 1980, so also having its 45th anniversary in the month of January. This is one of the all-time classic debut albums, I think, and that is the self-titled album by Pretenders. This was the introduction to the world of the wonderful talent that is Chrissie Hynde. And of course the original Pretenders, you had Pete Farndon on bass, you had James Honeyman Scott on guitars, and you had Martin Chambers on drums. And wow, I mean, just what a great band. It's just a pity that 2 albums into their career, they'd lose both Pete Farndon and James Honeyman Scott to drug overdoses. Chrissie Hynde would soldier on, Martin Chambers would be there on and off for a lot of the Pretenders' career. This album though, I mean, what a great way to announce yourself to the world. It's got the wonderful hit single Brass in Pocket, but a lot of this is a lot spikier than that. Brass in Pocket's a more laid back song, it's gentler, but you've got a lot of really prickly, almost punky stuff on here. It's great, it's post-punk, it's new wave, it's just terrific stuff. You've got Tattooed Love Boys and their great version of Stop Your Sobbing. You've got Kid, you've got Private Life, you've got The Phone Call, Up the Neck, Space Invader, Mystery Achievement. Just terrific songs, again, top to bottom. A lot of people would call this their favourite Pretenders album. I don't know. It would definitely be top 2 or 3 for me. I must do some more Pretenders content on the channel at some stage because I love, love, love this band. The next album we're having a look at is also having its 45th anniversary in the month of January. It was released on the 14th of January 1980. This is not a debut album though. This is several albums into a storied career. And I have Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse to thank for introducing me to this album in the very first episode of my Bicyclelegs Discovers Rush series I'll leave a link in the description to that episode, and that is Permanent Waves by Rush. Now, when I first listened to this album, or 2.5 years ago now, I thought I had definitely listened to their debut album, and I hadn't really explored any further because I wasn't all that keen on the debut album. I definitely knew Tom Sawyer because I'm a huge Futurama fan, and there's an episode of Futurama where that song features. I thought that was all the Rush I knew, because Rush were never popular here in Australia. That's why I did the whole Bicyclelegs Discovers Rush series, because I didn't know their catalogue because they just never were popular here. But when I first put this album on streaming, and The Spirit of Radio, the opening track, came on, I was like, I know this song, I've heard this before. I just had no idea it was a Rush song. So yeah, it's a great album opener though. I love this album because it's kind of got a foot in their 70s stuff and a foot in where they were gonna go in the 80s. So it's a really good introductory album. It may not be my absolute favourite Rush album, there's probably 3 or 4 I like a little better, but it's a fabulous album, and it's probably a great introduction to the band. You know, as good an album as any to give as someone's first Rush album. So thanks, Grant. You've got the wonderful Free Will and the great Jacob's Ladder on side 1. They're still lengthy-ish songs. You've only got 3 songs each side. You've got the wonderful Entre Nous on side 2, different strings, and then great album closer in Natural Science. So yeah, I mean, it's a bit proggy from the stuff that came before it. It's also getting a bit into the synth era that they would get into with Moving Pictures and Signals, and then the next sort of 2 or 3 albums after that. It's just a wonderful Rush album, and I can honestly say this album made me want to explore the rest of the catalogue, and eventually made me a Rush fan. So I can't give much higher recommendation than that. Now, the next album we're going to have a look at is actually having its 60th anniversary in the month of January. It was originally released on the 15th of January 1965. It is the second album by this band in the UK. As was often the case, such as with the Beatles and with this band, there would be different releases in the UK and the US, but this is their second UK album, and it is the Rolling Stones number 2. Now, I've done a studio albums ranked of the Rolling Stones albums from the 60s with the wonderful Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please check it out if you haven't already. I love early Stones. I love this sort of early Stones where they've got a foot in the R&B and they've got a foot in beat music, like what was happening with the Beatles and that sort of thing. And, you know, they're doing mostly cover versions at this stage. There are a few Jagger Richards originals, but it's a lot of cover versions. But they do great, great cover versions. Things like Susie Q, Under the Boardwalk, Everybody Needs Somebody to Love, You Can't Catch Me. You know, it's got their wonderful cover of Time Is on My Side. Time is on my side. Yes, it is. You know, that's still a classic Stones song. Still gets played on the radio. But you've also got Pain in My Heart and I Can't Be Satisfied, Down Home Girl. It's a really terrific early Stones album. If you like that early Stones like I do, it's definitely an album worth checking out. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 35th anniversary in the month of January. It was originally released on the 15th of January 1990. It's the third album by this band. It is the most well-known album by this band, and it is the best-selling album by this band. I am, of course, talking about Flood by They Might Be Giants. They Might Be Giants are one of my absolute favourite bands in the whole wide world. I definitely need to do a studio albums ranked on They Might Be Giants. It's is this album my favourite? Maybe not quite, but it's definitely right up there. I have a pretty contrarian number 1. They Might Be Giants album, but I'm going to do a ranking at some stage, so I won't reveal what that is here. But I mean, this has got one of their best known songs ever, which is Birdhouse in Your Soul. It's also got their wonderful cover version of Istanbul, Not Constantinople. It's got Particle Man, which is like a crowd favorite and a concert favorite. But you've also got other wonderful songs on here. There's a lot of songs. I think there's 18 songs or 19 songs on the album. You know, you've got Lucky Ball and Chain, which I think is great. Dead. Your Racist Friend, you know, getting a little political and that sort of thing, which I think is great. Twisting is a wonderful, wonderful song. We Want to Rock. Someone Keeps Moving My Chair. Hearing Aid. Minimum Wage. Yeah! Letterbox. Whistling in the Dark. Hot Char. Women and Men. Sapphire Bullets of Pure Love. These days when They Might Be Giants do Sapphire Bullets of Pure Love in concert, they play the whole song backwards. They have learned how to sing and play the song backwards. It's just mind-blowing. And then when they come back for their second set, they have a video of the backwards version that they just did on stage, flipped around so that the song's now forwards. And it's just absolutely brilliant. It's the nerdiest thing I've ever seen a rock band do, and I'm totally, totally here for it. You know, you've got their theme song, They Might Be Giants, you know, the song that they're named after, or the song that they named after themselves. The wonderful road movie to Berlin closes out the album. It is top to bottom a brilliant, brilliant, classic album. If you don't know They Might Be Giants, this is probably the best place to start. So highly, highly recommend this album. Next album we're going to be having a look at, it's another debut, although this guy had been in a band before he did this solo debut album. We're going back to 1980, so it's another 45th anniversary. It was released on the 18th of January 1980, and that is Mematic by John Foxx. Now, of course, John Foxx had been the original lead singer of Ultravox. They'd done 3 albums with him, hadn't been very successful. He left the band, decided to go solo. Ultravox would obviously join up with Midure and go on to much, much bigger success than they ever had with John Foxx. This album, solo album, though, did pretty well for John Foxx when it first came out. It's really minimalist. It's mostly just John Foxx on synthesizers and vocals and what he calls rhythm machine, so really primitive drum machine. There's a couple of guys give a little bit of additional synth and a little bit of bass, but it's mostly just John Foxx. It's minimalist, it's atmospheric, it's moody. It's kind of a combination of science fiction and film noir, if you can get the idea of what that might sound like musically. And he's got that wonderful, wonderful sort of dispassionate delivery with his vocals. Sort of passionate and dispassionate at the same time. Again, if that makes any sense. You've got Plaza. He's a liquid. He's a liquid they'd actually he'd been performing with Ultravox before he left. Underpass, Metal Beat, No One Driving is great. A New Kind of Man, Blurred Girl. I love Tidal Wave. Really, really moody and atmospheric, that one. And Touch and Go closes out the album. Just a terrific album. Again, if you're not familiar with this album, I absolutely highly recommend you go check it out because I love it to death. I still think it's probably my favorite John Foxx solo album. So make of that what you will. Okay, the 5th and final album of this 10 that is released in 1980, so having its 45th anniversary in the month of January. This one was released on the 21st of January 1980. It's the 5th album by this band and it is their absolute breakthrough album. I am, of course, talking about True Colours by Split Enz. Now, I've got a couple of Split Enz videos on the channel. The very, very first video I ever did was a studio albums ranked of Split Enz. I'll leave a link to that in the description. I stand by my ranking. I still think it's a good ranking, but please be kind because I didn't know what I was doing as far as making videos and that sort of thing. some might say. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I think I've improved over the years. I've also done a favourite songs from each album show with Liam Hare on Split Ends, and I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. And if you go to my shorts feed, one of my very early shorts, I show a bunch of different variations of both this cover and the cover for the follow-up Waiata, also known as Corroboree. But this album, you know, I mean, the first 4 albums that Split Ends did, they were very arty. There was a lot of sort of, you know, extra instruments in the mix. It was, you know, there was a lot of layers to their music. Even on Frenzy had started to simplify things a little bit, but there was still a lot going on in those songs. This is really, really stripped back. It's new wave, it's straight ahead, it's prickly, it's edgy, and it's absolutely wonderful. It opens up with the incredible Shark Attack. You then get I Got You, which was a big #1 single here and in New Zealand. You know, made a dent in the charts over in the UK as well. Even got a little bit of action on the Billboard 100. So, yeah, I mean, probably one of their best known songs. What's the Matter With You is brilliant. Double Happy, one of 2 brilliant instrumentals on this album. My son absolutely adores the song Double Happy. I Wouldn't Dream of It is great. I Hope I Never, beautiful ballad. It's really one of a kind song on this album. Piano ballad rather than everything else being very much sort of really sharp and in focus and up tempo. Nobody Takes Me Seriously is great. Missing Person, wonderful unknown Neil Finn song that I think more people should know about. Poor Boy was never released as a single here in Australia, but it's a staple of classic rock radio here. Wonderful song. How Can I Resist Her is great. And then The Coral Sea is the other instrumental on the album, and it's really wonderful. Top to bottom, a great album. Has to be, I think, in anybody's Split Ends top 5. Just an absolutely brilliant album. Now, the next 2 albums we're going to have a look at are both released on exactly the same day. They're both celebrating their 55th anniversary in the month of January. And they were both released on the 26th of January 1970. And the first one is just a stone cold classic. It's the last album by this duo, and that is Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. It's their best-selling album. It's, I think, diamond in the United States, so that's over 10 million copies sold. It, you know, got Grammy Awards. It's got some of their best-known songs, like the title track. I mean, I can still listen to Bridge Over Troubled Water, the song, listen to Art Garfunkel's beautiful vocal on it, and it still sends shivers up my spine. Love it. El Condor Pasa, wonderful South American folk tune with the panpipes and that sort of thing on it. Love it, love it, love it. Cecilia's a great fun song, just mostly sort of, you know, guitar, acoustic guitar and lots of percussion and hand claps and slaps and that sort of thing. Keep the Customer Satisfied is great. So Long Frank Lloyd Wright, another beautiful Art Garfunkel vocal. Absolutely stunning stuff. Side 2 opens with The Boxer. It's always a toss-up between The Boxer and the song America, which is on their previous album Bookends, as to which one is my favourite Simon and Garfunkel song of all time. Sometimes it's America, sometimes it's The Boxer. The Boxer is without a doubt one of the greatest things Paul Simon ever wrote. And the performance is just incredible. Baby Driver is great. The Only Living Boy in New York is lovely. Why Don't You Write Me? Their great live version of Bye Bye Love. You know, the Everly Brothers song. They were heavily indebted to the Everly Brothers for Simon and Garfunkel, and they were the first to admit it. In fact, the Everly Brothers would provide backup vocals on the song Graceland on Paul Simon's album of the same name. So that's an interesting little fact. And then it closes with the short little song, Song for the Asking, which I think is a beautiful, slightly melancholy way to end the career of Simon and Garfunkel, at least as far as albums go. they would reunite for a single and for a bunch of tours and that sort of thing. But this was the last Simon and Garfunkel album we would ever get. On the same day, 26th of January 1970, we also got the second album by one of my favourite bands in the world, and that is Chicago, with the album that is simply called Chicago. Of course, their first album they were known as and was called Chicago Transit Authority. This one is simply called Chicago. A lot of people refer to it these days as Chicago 2, because the next one would be called Chicago 3. Chicago Transit Authority had been a pretty successful album for them. This one was even bigger, had hit singles on it for a start. I mean, he has the wonderful 25 or 6 to 4. I know this is a huge statement, but Terry Kath's guitar solo on 25 or 6 to 4 is my favourite guitar solo of all time. It's got to be the full album version though, not the single edit. It's got to be the full album version. Of course, the other big hit single off this album was Make Me Smile, which is the opening part of one of 3 great suites on this album, which is Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan, you know, which also has Colour My World, which was also a single later on. But, you know, it starts off with Moving In, and you've got The Road, you've got Poem for the People, you've got In the Country, which is a great song. You've got Fancy Colours. You've got the other suites, the AM PM Morning Suite, which ends with Memories of Love. Beautiful Terry Kath with strings and flutes. And oh, it's just really gorgeous. And a little bit sad. And then you get the wonderful Political It Better End Soon suite from Robert Lamb. And then you get Where Do We Go From Here at the end, which is the first song on a Chicago album written by Peter Cetera. I mean, this band had 3 great vocalists in Peter Cetera, Robert Lamb, and Terry Kath. Terry Kath was just an insane guitar player. Their 3-piece horn section, Walt Parazada, Lee Loughnane, and James Pankow. Brilliant drummer, Danny Seraphin. I mean, just top-notch band. If you only think of this band as like mushy 80s ballads, go and listen to an album like this, because this is great stuff. It's progressive, it's jazzy, it rocks like hell in places. Just a wonderful album. This is a misunderstood band. I will go to my grave believing that. And if you can find the CD with the Steven Wilson remix of this album, get that, because this album was always a little muddy sounding, and Steven Wilson does a really good job of trying to clean it up. Speaking of Steven Wilson, the last album we're going to have a look at today is having its 30th anniversary in the month of January. It was originally released on the 30th of January 1995. It is their 3rd album, and that is The Sky Moves Sideways by Porcupine Tree. Now, I've recently done a Porcupine Tree studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Please do check that out if you haven't already. And maybe I didn't rank this one quite as high as some other people would, but that doesn't mean I don't love this album, because Porcupine Tree are, to me, one of those bands that honestly have never done a bad album. Not even a good, like, everything I think is at least great with this band. So, and this one's really moody. It's very psychedelic. It's very Pink Floyd. This is, you know, got that sort of early Pink Floyd, like early 70s to mid 70s Pink Floyd. I mean, Steven Wilson's on record as saying Pink Floyd are his favourite band of all time. He's also on record as saying that maybe he was pandering to the Pink Floyd audience a little much with this album. I still think it's a terrific album though. I mean, the big piece on this album is The Sky Moves Sideways, Phase 1 and Phase 2, split into 2 pieces to bookend the album, much like Shine On You Crazy Diamond was on Wish You Were Here. So, yeah. But you've also got Stars Die, you've got Dislocated Day, really good up-tempo song. Moon Touches Your Shoulder, Prepare Yourself. And then depending on which CD or vinyl version you get, there's the wonderful long jam Moon Loop, which is just really great atmospheric stuff. Really trippy. I love it. So there you have it. Those are my 10 anniversary albums for the month of January 2025. Please do let me know in the comments which ones I left out, because I know I left out a bunch. So please do let me know in the comments. Sometimes they're things that were on my longer list. Sometimes they're things I never even thought of. And I love it when you come up with those ones, because it makes me go and listen to those albums. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to see some of my other anniversary album shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my studio albums ranked shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, like the aforementioned Rock Daydream Nation, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter, and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated Bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.